So, the Premier League season is now over. Manchester City have now officially finished third in the Premier League. So, I feel like it is only right that we go through the entire Manchester City squad today and give them their ratings out of 10 for this season in the Premier League. And what I'm going to do, but the way I'm going to base this, is that every single player that has played more than 5 appearances in the Premier League this season qualifies for this rating. The same way that if, you win the Premier League, you have to make 5 appearances to be able to qualify for a medal. I've kind of use that same logic in this video to decide who kind of makes it, because it's unfair for someone like, for example, Vitor Reis to be ranked out of 10 when he's only played 1 game in the Premier League. So that's how I'm going to do it today. We're going to get into the full squad. We're going to go through every single player that's played more than 5 games, give them their rating out of 10, and let's just jump straight into it. Starting off with Stefan Ortega, who I'm going to give a 6 out of 10. He's made 13 appearances in the Premier League this season for us. He's kept 3 clean sheets. And ultimately, look, he's done a steady job when he's come in for Ederson. Ederson has had a couple of periods where he has been injured this season, but whenever Ortega's come into the side, I have noticed a little bit of a drop-off, not only obviously in the distribution department, but also in the shot-stopping department. I think he's been a little bit weak at times in terms of his shot-stopping. So for me, I'm going to give him a 6. I think he's performed decently, but nothing outstanding for me. And of course, next up is our number 1 goalkeeper, Ederson, who I'm giving an 8 out of 10 for this season. I think he's been really good. I think that, the people that have complained about Ederson, I don't know what they're talking about, to be completely honest. I think he's had probably one of his best seasons in a Manchester City shirt, if we're being completely honest. He's made some really, really top draw saves throughout the season to help us get Champions League football. 26 games, 10 clean sheets, 4 assists. That's one thing that people need to realise, is the fact he's got 4 assists in the Premier League season. That is the first time a goalkeeper has ever done that. So I think he's been top drawer. I think he's been really good in the shot stopping department. Obviously, he's really good at dominating his box, claiming crosses. His distribution is outstanding. I think he's had a really, really solid season for us. And for me, he gets an 8 out of 10. And for John Stones, I'm going to give him a 6 out of 10. And I know that might seem shockingly high for some people because of the amount of games that he's played this season, the amount of time he's actually been out injured. But hear me out for a second. The reason why I've given him some leniency in terms of giving him a 6 out of 10 is the 2 last-minute goals he scored for us. He scored the last-minute equaliser against Arsenal when we were struggling to, ram down that door when they had 10 men. We got that final goal in the final stages of that game at the Etihad through John Stones. And then on top of that as well, he also scored the last minute winner against Wolverhampton as well. So that is 4 points that John Stones has picked us up throughout the season, despite only playing 11 games, despite being injured for a very, very heavy period of the season. When he has been in the side, he has scored some crucial goals. So for me, that warrants a 6 out of 10. Yes, of course, the amount of time injured, that is a separate conversation, whether he stays at the club going forward because of the amount of injuries he picks up. However, for this season, I'm going to give him a 6 out of 10 because those goals, they were crucial to us getting Champions League football in the end. And then next up, for Nathan Ake, I'm going to give him a 5 out of 10. Nothing personal against Nathan Ake. I think when he's fit, he's an absolutely superb player, playing in that left-back role, that centre-back role. He's so steady. You know what you're going to get from Nathan Ake when he plays. However, he's just not played anywhere near enough this season. 10 games, he's not scored any goals, he's not really had any meaningful contributions to games, and he's just played nowhere near enough for me this season. So unfortunately for Nathan Ake, as much as I do like him, as much as I think he's a really good squad option for us this season, he's just not been available anywhere near enough. And 10 games in the Premier League is just, it's nowhere near enough to be able to give him above a 5 for not doing anything else. Then for Manuel Akanji, some people might think this is a little bit harsh, but I'm going to give him a 5 out of 10. I think he's been quite poor this season. The amount of mistakes that he's made in our own final third, then also you compound that by, defensive errors as well. I just think overall, he's not really been with it this season. And, I'm not saying he's a bad player. We've seen, obviously, in the treble winning season, absolutely exceptional during that season. However, I do feel like there's been a notable drop-off from him this season. So for me, despite playing 26 games in the league, which is pretty high for some of the players that have been injured in that back line this season, I'm going to have to give him a 5. I don't feel like he's been anywhere near good enough, not good enough for a 6. If I would give him, a rating in between, I think that's probably a little bit more fair just for his availability, 5.5. But yeah, just not good enough for a 6 for my opinion. Then moving on to Ruben Dias, I don't think he's hit the heights that he has in previous seasons this season. I think that's quite obvious obvious to every Manchester City fan that he's been a little bit of a level below this season. However, I'm still going to give him a 7 out of 10 because he's been relatively available this season, 27 games played in the Premier League. And on top of that as well, while he's not been at his best, I still think that he's been relatively solid. He still gets off really key interceptions, blocks, last-ditch tackles, all of that type of stuff. He has the desire. He always gives his all. He's just really not been on it this season. But I still think he's been good enough to get a 7 out of 10. So for me, Ruben Dias is a 7 out of 10, a solid 7 out of 10. And then moving on to Matheus Nunes. And for me, I'm going to give him a 7 as well. I think he's performed very admirably in that right back role. When he first went into the role, I think there were some massive questions about him defensively. He was making some errors. However, as the season's gone on, as he's been able to learn that role a little bit more, I do think that he's got a lot more comfortable in there. I think Bernardo Silva also playing in the midfield, helping him out in that channel, has really been effective for him. But I think that he's been really useful for us going forward. Scoring that key last-minute winner against Aston Villa, which has ended up being absolutely crucial for Champions League football. And down that right-hand side, he offers a threat. He's very athletic. He's quick. He gets up and down a lot. Got a great engine on him. And I think he's been really useful for us in the second half of the season. So for me, despite obviously not having a good first start of the season whatsoever, in the second half of the season, Matheus Nunes has been quite solid. And I'm going to give him a 7 out of 10. Then moving on to the player that I'm going to give as my highest rating in this video. And that is Joško Gvardiol. A 9 out of 10 I'm going to give him for this season. Now, I must say that he has had some sloppy moments throughout the season. Absolutely. Especially in that December period where we were really going through it. Joško Gvardiol was really poor. Do not get me wrong. There was a good month or so where I thought he was quite poor. However, throughout the rest of the season, no matter what position he's been playing in, whether it's left back, centre back, he has been one of the best players on the pitch pretty much every single time. He scored some really big goals for us. I think he scored 5 goals in the Premier League this season, 37 appearances. One thing that you have to say about a player this season is that their availability means absolutely everything to this side. And Joško Gvardiol has been available for every minute of every game. So fair play to Joško Gvardiol. He is my player of the season. I think he's been outstanding in every aspect of his game. You know, he can brush up a little bit on those silly mistakes that he makes at times. Obviously, against Bournemouth, he even gave the ball away quite sloppily to Kovacic, which meant Kovacic had to give away a red card, but he's still been absolutely outstanding this season. One of the bright sparks of this season. So for me, Joško Gvardiol, 9 out of 10. Then moving on to Rico Lewis, who's been a player that I think splits the Manchester City fan base a little bit. I think there's some Manchester City fans that rate him quite highly. There's some Manchester City fans that think he's absolutely useless. I'm somewhere in between. I think he's a player that has good use in certain games, in terms of games against maybe lower opposition, which we can dominate the ball, because he's a very good technician in the midfield areas. He's very technically sound. He's got a good eye for passes in the midfield. So I do think that he has room in this Manchester City squad. I think that he's a really solid technical player that could improve going forward. I think he needs to nail down a position, but for me, I'm going to give him a 6 out of 10 this season. I don't think he's been outstanding in any sort of way. I think he was more involved in the first part of the season more than the back end of the season, which I think tells you a little bit of where maybe Pep Guardiola views him in this Manchester City side at this moment in time. But one thing is for sure, he's a very good technical footballer, and I'm going to give him a 6 out of 10. He's been relatively decent this season. Then for the man, the myth, the legend, the player that we have no idea where he currently is at the moment, Abdulkadir Kusanov. 6 games in the Premier League this season, and to be honest, he was outstanding in the majority of those games, maybe outside of the Chelsea game where he really struggled, his first game in the Premier League. Outside of that, he was outstanding for us. He won Player of the Month for February in the Premier League. He was really, really solid. And then Pep Guardiola just decided that he was not going to play football anymore. Very, very bizarre stuff. But I'm going to give him a 7 out of 10. And, you know, he hasn't played many games in the Premier League this season, but when he's played, he was one of our best players consistently every single time he played. So it's hard to really judge this one because he has played so little games in the Premier League this season. He's only just qualified for this list by playing 6 games. But I think he's been really solid when he's played. So it's a little bit of a tough one. I'm going to give him a 7 out of 10, which I know obviously is on the same rating as Ruben Dias, and he's played 27 games. But I think he's been really solid when he plays. So it's one of those where it's a little bit strange why Pep Guardiola has done what he's done. But when he's played, he's been solid. So for me, I'm giving Abdulkadir Kusanov 7 out of 10 for this season. Then moving on to Kevin De Bruyne. King Kevin, who obviously sadly is leaving the club this summer. Not his best season in the Manchester City shirt. I think all Manchester City fans can agree on that. He definitely has shown signs of declining physically this season. But I'm gonna give him a 7 out of 10. He's still created a lot of chances throughout the season. He's been very creative. He's only got 4 goals and 7 assists, which is a very low return for Kevin De Bruyne in a Premier League season. But I still think that, there's been a lot of chances created. He still had very good games. You think back, what game was it? I think it was Bournemouth, was it? No, it was Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace, we lost. We were losing 2-0. Kevin De Bruyne turns it on. We win 5-2. He scored that inspirational free kick to get us back in the game. So Kevin De Bruyne has had moments throughout the season, don't get me wrong. He's been really, really good in some games, really bad in some games, if we're being completely honest. I know it's not the Premier League, but you think back to the Champions League game against Real Madrid where he was really just a passenger, and you hate to see Kevin De Bruyne as a passenger in those type of games because you know what he can do. But yeah, Kevin De Bruyne not really been at it this season. He's still had a decent season, so I'm going to give him a 7 out of 10. Then moving on to İlkay Gündoğan, I'm going to give him a 7 out of 10 as well. Maybe a little bit too overhated this season. In the first half of the season, absolutely, there were issues with him. His legs in midfield, without Rodri in there, without any sort of midfielder that could help support him in there, he really got exposed for his age. And that's nothing to do with İlkay Gündoğan. That's the fact that we couldn't have the legs in there to support him. And he was really getting exposed, and it looked bad for him. And, at that point in time, we're probably looking at a 4 or 5 out of 10, which he was going to get for the season. However, he bounced back towards the second half of the season. I think we saw, shades of the old İlkay Gündoğan scoring that bicycle kick on the final day of the season. Did throw back some memories to, some very good end of the season goals for İlkay Gündoğan at Aston Villa. But ultimately, I'm going to give him a 7 out of 10. I thought he pulled back his season really well. He was really solid in some games. Technically a brilliant footballer. He just needs those legs around him in the midfield to help support him. And for Mateo Kovacic, I'm going to give him an 8. I think he's overhated at times. Yes, of course, he has some bad games. The most annoying thing for me about Mateo Kovacic is his flicks that he does at times in the midfield. I mean, my word, when he just flicks it, it can drive me insane. However, he's probably been our best midfielder this season. The way that he carries the ball through the lines, some of the passes that he picks through the lines as well. And ultimately, he's ended up scoring quite a few goals for us this season. 6 goals in the Premier League is quite a lot for Mateo Kovacic, and he's also done a decent amount of defensive work for us as well. He's one of the only midfielders that has legs in there in the midfield this season, so I think he's been an integral part of the reason why we've actually finished in the Champions League space this season, so I'm going to give him an 8 out of 10. I thought he's actually been quite solid. And for Bernardo Silva, similarly to İlkay Gündoğan, he was a player that I think a lot of Manchester City fans were looking at in that first half of the season and thinking to themselves, we do not have the old Bernardo Silva. Bernardo Silva has aged. And I think in some aspects, Manchester City fans might have been right on that. However, towards the back end of the season, similarly to İlkay Gündoğan, he has pulled his season back. And I think he was, again, integral to us finishing in the Champions League spot. I think that ability to be really defensive at the same time of holding possession really well. He scored some big goals as well for us. So ultimately, Bernardo Silva has pulled back his season. I'm going to give him a 7 out of 10 because I thought he fought back. He was a big part of our Champions League qualification, and he did every single role he could for us, whether it was playing in the central midfield, whether he had to play deeper in that right hand channel to be able to support Mateus Nunes in certain games. I think he did a really, really good job in the second half of the season. So for me, he saved it. He gets a 7 out of 10. And now moving into more of the attacking players, James McAtee is the next player I'm going to be giving my rating to, and I'm going to give him a 6 out of 10. I think he's made a good impact on the squad this season. He's come in, he scored 3 goals in the Premier League. He's only played 15 minutes, and he's been a little bit of a bit part player, especially coming into towards the back end of the season. I think he's had some good moments, don't get me wrong. He showed a lot of promise going forward, and there is definitely a player in there. However, I don't think I can give him more than a 6 out of 10 for this season, just because I don't think he's ultimately contributed that much to our team. And then for Nico Gonzalez, our new summer signing in the midfield, and I've been really impressed with him since he's come into this Manchester City team. 11 appearances, which is a little bit lower than what I would have wanted, to be honest. I think Nico Gonzalez has definitely shown signs of being able to play more games than he did, really, towards the back end of the season. He scored a really, really impressive goal against Bournemouth in the second last game of the season. And ultimately, I think he's been really good. He's added a bit more freshness into that midfield. He's been an important player for us in certain games towards the back end of the season. So I'm going to give him a 7 out of 10. I think he's been really solid for us, and I think he will be a hell of a player going forward for us next season and beyond. And then for Nico O'Reilly, our young talent coming through this season, who's been absolutely spectacular at times, I'm going to give him a 7 out of 10. Now, I know he's only played 7 games. Sorry, no, 9 games in the Premier League this season, but I thought his impact in those games was quite considerable. He scored 2 goals, 2 big goals as well. And ultimately, I thought when he came into the side, he performed with maturity. He had some really good performances. I think there was only a couple of games where I thought, maybe he had relatively bad performances, but I think overall he's been a real shining light of this season as a youngster coming through. So for me, Nico O'Reilly gets a 7 out of 10. Now for Jack Grealish, I'm unfortunately going to have to give him a 4 out of 10. It's been a really, really, really poor season for Jack Grealish. I wanted him to turn it around this season. 1 goal and 1 assist in the Premier League this season is just nowhere near good enough from what we expect from Jack Grealish. Yes, he's had his own issues in terms of, injuries, little niggling injuries and stuff like that. But Jack Grealish should be playing more than what he has. He should be scoring more goals. He should be assisting more goals. And ultimately, he's just really had no effect on this season. And when you think about the Jack Grealish that played in the treble-winning season, the effect that we know he can have on the Manchester City side, he's just been nowhere near that this season. And unfortunately, it's going to have to be a 4 out of 10. He's just been nowhere near it. And then moving on to Erling Haaland, 8 out of 10 for me. You can't really give him less than 8 out of 10. He scored 22 goals in the Premier League this season. He is the reason why, ultimately, we have qualified for Champions League football, because he has scored a big bulk of our goals this season. And look, ultimately, I think it says everything you need to know about Erling Haaland. The fact I'm giving him an 8 out of 10 for a 22 goal season. The majority of players, if they score 22 goals in a Premier League season, they're getting a 9 minimum out of 10. Erling Haaland, he's missed quite a few chances this season. He's quite not really been at it the same way that maybe he was in the first season, specifically when he came in. And hopefully Erling Haaland can hit those heights again next season. But yeah, for this season, I'm going to give him an 8 out of 10. Still scored a lot of goals. We know obviously Erling Haaland does that, but missed a few chances. So for me, an 8 out of 10. And then for a player that I think has disappointed a lot of people this season, Phil Foden. And I'm going to give him a 6 out of 10. I don't think he's been as poor as some people have suggested. Don't get me wrong, he's not been at his scintillating best by any stretch of the imagination. However, you've still got to respect the fact he scored 7 goals in the Premier League this season. That's more than a lot of Manchester City players, if we're being completely honest. So he's still contributed more goals than a lot of Man City players, despite having a poor season. I'm giving him a 6 out of 10 because he's just not been at it, specifically towards the back end of the season. Pep Guardiola's not been playing him. I know obviously he's been having personal issues off the pitch, and obviously that has been affecting performance on top of injuries as well. However, he's just not really hit the heights, anywhere near the heights of last season, where, let's be real, he was a 10 out of 10 last season. This season, a 6 out of 10, a fall off from grace. I think he'll be back next season, but for this season, he's been relatively poor. And then for our major summer signing, Omar Marmoush, 7 goals in 16 appearances in the Premier League since he joined in January, and he's been one of the biggest breaths of fresh air in the back end of the season. That goal that he scored against Bournemouth, my word, it was absolutely absurd. The dip into the top corner that he gets on that strike, just ridiculous strike from Omar Marmoush. And for me, he is an 8 out of 10. I think he's been really, really solid since he's come into the side. Scored some absolutely banging goals. Scored a hat-trick against Newcastle. Has been really, really fun to watch. And he scored a lot of goals for us. So yeah, for me, 8 out of 10 from Marmoush. He's had a really good impact since he's joined the club. And for Jeremy Doku, I'm going to give him a 7 out of 10. He had pretty much the identical season to last season. 3 goals, 6 assists. I still think that there is a real player in there for Jeremy Doku. The way that he can skim players, the excitement he brings when you watch him play football. There's just that last little bit of end product in which he does need to improve on. He's only young. I still think he can reach, that top level. However, we're just yet to see it yet from him. 7 out of 10. He's still created a lot of chances this season. He's still made a lot of moments happen for us, specifically in certain games where we didn't look like we're going to get anything out of. I think back to that Tottenham game. Jeremy Doku was the reason why we went and won that game. So for me, Jeremy Doku, been really, really bright in moments this season, so I'm going to give him a 7 out of 10. And then finally, to wrap up the video, the final player that I'm going to be giving my rating to is Savinho, our summer signing. And I'm going to give him a 6 out of 10. I'm going to be honest. 8 assists in the Premier League. Very, very good stuff. He's been creative at times. However, 1 goal in the Premier League from an attacking player is really poor. And the reason why I'm giving him a 6 out of 10 is because he should have more goals this season. He had a lot of good opportunities to score, and his finishing's been really, really poor. If there's one thing that I think Savinho needs to work on in the upcoming summer, is finishing. Because, I mean, my word, his lack of conviction in the final third at times is really, really worrying. However, there is absolutely a player in there. The build-up, the way he beats players, the pace, the ability to go both ways. he is a very, very exciting player to watch, but he needs to get that final bit into his game of making the right decision at the right moment. He's a very young player still, so don't get me wrong. I still think there's a lot of room for him to be a top-class player going forward. But for this season, I've been a little bit disappointed from his finishing. Maybe 6 is a little bit harsh. Maybe 7 is maybe a little bit more fair. But I think the finishing is the part that's really killed me a bit this season. So maybe a 6.5 out of 10 is a little bit more fair for Savinho. But ultimately, those are my player ratings for the Manchester City squad this season. Let me know if there's any that you disagree with in the comment section below. I feel like I've given a relatively fair analysis of the players this season. I feel like, you know, Josko Gvardiol is the rightful winner of player of the season. There have been a few poor performers like Jack Grealish, like Nathan Ake. Maybe giving Nathan Ake a 4 was a little bit harsh. I don't know. Let me know in the comment section below which ones you agree with, which ones you disagree with. And yeah, thank you for tuning in to another video. Hit the like button if you did enjoy the content. Hit that subscribe button as well if you do want to see more of this lovely little face. Don't unsubscribe, please. And I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for all of your support. And yeah, I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.